more carloads of potatoes shipped out of Osseo than any other shipping point in the U.S. We were known as the potato capital of the world at that time.
The idea for Brooklyn Park was always to have a park within a couple of minutes of every home, and they've done that.
And that plan absolutely was critical to how the city has developed throughout the last 20 years, without a doubt.
Because this was the place to go, and this is where things were happening.
We have our own diversity within Brooklyn Park, and it's just wonderful. It's really special. You can't go anywhere else and find it, so that's what makes Brooklyn Park so wonderful.
A long time Africa was home, but now we just feel Brooklyn Park is home.
Well, it was known all over the eastern half of the U.S. that Minnesota Territory would now be open for settlement and that land was available. And the word got out that the land was good for farming, and the soil was rich. So people came pouring in. Brooklyn Township was settled in 1853 to 1855. The township was formally organized in 1858 at the time that Minnesota became a state.
It was 1870. August was the month, and my great-grandfather's name was August Hessman, and his wife Henriette. They heard that there was some property available through his wife Henrietta, who was a Harkup. This is my great-grandfather's place. The barn that's behind us was already here. They purchased the property from Matthew Blowers, and then my grandfather in 1883 built the home that we are currently in today.
Some of the history said there was 14 families. I've actually found many more than that came here from a town or area called Adrian, Michigan. And they settled, all the families settled in the northwest area of Brooklyn Township near Osseo. And there was a town near Adrian, Michigan called Brooklyn. So they liked that name. It had been used before for many cities to the east, so they took the name Brooklyn. Brooklyn Township was originally settled for the farming, but if you look at any of the census records from 1860 to the early 1900s, the second most prominent occupation is lumberman. And lumberman was kind of a catch-all term for anybody associated with the lumber industry. There was some lumbermen who lived in Brooklyn Township because it was next to the Mississippi. All the logs that came into the Mississippi and Rum Rivers and were going to sawmills in North Minneapolis had to come through here. So the Mississippi and Rum River Boom Company had property in Brooklyn Township along the river. So through 1850s until early 1900s, you know, tens of thousands of logs came down the Mississippi right through Brooklyn Township every year. Each log that was cut down had a marking or some initials on it, you know, telling the boom company or the men in the boom companies which mill it should go to. So they would sort the logs out here and deliver them in a group to the sawmills or in a boom. And what the key to it is the islands on the Mississippi here. So they used the islands to help sort out the logs. So you could, you know, if they were going to sawmills in St. Anthony, you would get them onto the east channel of the river. If they were going to sawmills in Minneapolis, you would get them into the west channel. So it was the islands here through Brooklyn Township were the perfect way for them to start sorting out these logs. Being a river pig was a very dangerous job and something that I would never aspire to. There was lots of injuries and deaths, and it was a tough way to make a living. Those guys, they had the spike shoes, so they were walking on logs, but you know, it was very easy to slip and fall, and if you did, it was to drown or be crushed by the logs so it was very dangerous work. Without those men, The logs could not be sorted out, could not been delivered to the mills. So they played a very important role. But then what officially put an end to it was the building of dams on the Mississippi, and what put an end to it here was the Coon Rapids Dam. So once the dams were built, there was no way to get logs on into the river and into North Minneapolis.
What makes Brooklyn Park a little unique from, say, a Maple Grove or a Plymouth or Corcoran, we didn't have the big oak woods here. This was a Mississippi River sand plain. And trees were not plentiful as they were in like Maple Grove. And the soil was very sandy, you know, and kind of an outwash of Mississippi River. So you're somewhat limited in terms of your farming activities.
So early, when it was first settled, Brooklyn Township was subsistence farming, and really the only cash crop that was growing was wheat. But when you get to the late 19th century and early 20th century, then Brooklyn Township really switches over. Some of the southern part of the township switches over to market gardening. So they're growing garden crops to sell in markets in Minneapolis.
In towards Crystal, Robbinsdale, towards Minneapolis, there were smaller plots, and those were called truck farms. So a farmer could have maybe 10, 15 acres, and they could have many different crops grown in that property. You could have beets, and they could have corn, they could have radishes, green beans, but they were so close to Minneapolis that they could, every morning, they could bunch up all of those vegetables and they could take them into Minneapolis and sell at the farmer's market.
We had both watermelons, muskmelons. My dad raised sweet corn. So yeah, there were a lot of vegetables raised at one time.
So all through the Brooklyns, Brooklyn Park and Brooklyn Center, it was mostly truck farming towards the center of the city.
And then we gradually converted just to pretty much raising potatoes.
The northern half, or what's Brooklyn Park today, potato farming takes over.
The potato farming started here in 1885 to 1890 in that area.
So Brooklyn Park, not being a first ring suburb, had a lot of big farm areas, like potato farming.
I think some of the most successful farmers in Brooklyn Park were those that were here during the time that the Scandinavian huge immigration came to Minnesota.
You get a large influx of German, Norwegian, and Swedish immigrants that come here in the late 19th century.
They would come by a team of horses and wagon loads. These were obviously all picked by hand at that time. They were in baskets.
These tasks used to be very labor intensive. My dad would go out with a 2-row digger behind a tractor, dig the potatoes out, lay them on top of the ground, and then kids would come along and pick them up in the bushel baskets, and then you'd lift the bushel baskets up on a trailer.
What really made potato farming take off here was the automatic equipment, the potato pickers, and so instead of being picked by hand, it was automated. And that really allowed the farmers to start farming vast more acreage.
Potatoes, if they were shipped out of this area, were taken to Osseo for shipment.
In 1910, there were more carloads of potatoes shipped out of Osseo than any other shipping point in the U.S. We were known as the potato capital of the world at that time.
The 1930s were desperate times for farmers, and probably particularly in an area like Brooklyn Park where the soil is so droughty.
And along with the drought that went with that, the early Ohio without irrigation, I can't imagine the product that they had. It was not very good.
The weather people today are still talking about how hot it was in 1936. Well, nothing could grow under those conditions. And if you were a sandy soil like you have in Brooklyn Park, you probably almost lost the farm.
Then they started irrigation here. We had 200-foot booms, and it was just like a big sprinkler. And then we went to wheel lines. The irrigation line was the axle, and there were 6-foot wheels. When you watered for that 4 hours, and then there was a device in the middle with the wheel line, and you'd roll it over those 22 rows and set it up again. And then we went to traveling guns. It's a wonderful way to irrigate, but you do have to set them up both in the morning and in the evening, and they run for about 9-10 hours, and that will cover about 10 acres, and it does a very good job of watering.
At some point in time in a growing urban area like this, it's going to click in the farmer's mind, says, well, this isn't going to be farming forever.
In 1976, it was a very dry year. We had irrigated from Memorial Day on, never had one day off until the crop was watered out. Some of the
Initially, there was one-room schools that popped up throughout Brooklyn Township. There was just 4 small schools. There was the Berg School, the Smith School, the Dunning School in Riverview, and so students went there in grades 1 through 8.
I went to elementary school, which was at the time called Schreiber School, over on Regent Avenue North. That was an independent school when I was in 1st grade. Well, then they forced these independent school districts to go away. This area wanted to go with Osseo.
Where you went to school was mainly based on your trade or transportation routes. The farmers or the residents had to decide, what their school district would be, and it just aligned with the towns that they use. So in the western half of the township, they used Osseo, so they joined the Osseo School District. And you had the Anoka-Hennepin School District. The people that along the eastern half, they joined the Anoka-Hennepin School District, and in the southwest, they joined the Robbinsdale School District.
Until the school districts in the 50s really started getting bigger and bigger. That was the way kids went to school, was one room.
They got Parks Center High School came about in the early 1970s, and Champlin Park High School, as part of the Anoka-Hennepin School District, came in the early 1990s.
The high school came in 70 or 71, and there was really nothing. It's right next to the Brooklyn Center border with Brooklyn Park, so Park Center is a good name. But when Champlin Park came in, that should have been called Brooklyn Park, because that is totally in Brooklyn Park. They still get the utilities from Brooklyn Park, and that's the way it is.
Unfortunately, for Brooklyn Park, we have 2 high schools, Park Center and Champlin Park, both located within the city, neither of whom are called Brooklyn Park High School.
Because there was no downtown, there was really no central theme or central area to develop a school district around. They always felt that these other towns were their downtown, so that's where they would go to school. A downtown is what brings everything together, including schools and education, and Brooklyn Township never had that. In the state legislature in the mid-1960s, there was money was set aside to build 2 more junior colleges. One was going to go in Hennepin County, and that became Anoka-Ramsey. They wanted to do another one in Hennepin County, and they kind of chose the Brooklyn Park, Osseo area. And Osseo really wanted to have that junior college, but Brooklyn Park had available land. So at that time it was still all farmland, so they could have pretty much as much land as they wanted.
Our doors opened on September 19th, 1966. That first year, we had 414 students and 29 faculty and staff members. In 1969, we moved to our current location right here in Brooklyn Park. We were known then as North Hennepin Junior College, and since then, we have changed our name to North Hennepin Community College.
And the first 3 buildings where we had a science building there, it's the remnants of that, the maintenance building, the library building, and a L building, the literary building. Our big thrust, and the one that took off and really helped chart our direction, was evenings. If there was enough interest there, we could start, let's say, a class in basic English or in business techniques. And so we began quite an off-campus program in those early years. I got the feeling that from the students that were here that they really appreciated the fact that the state had put these schools here.
Today, North Hennepin Community College is one of the most diverse institutions in the state of Minnesota. We serve over 10,000 students, many of whom attend part-time. We have 44% diversity amongst our student body, and each year we award over $41 million in grants and scholarships to our students. For one thing, we offer one of the lowest tuition rates in the state. We offer free tutoring services. We have a counseling office. We've got jobs available to students. So for many reasons, North Hennepin Community College is really the right choice for our students who are looking for an environment in which they're well supported, they have the opportunity to explore degree options, an amazing opportunity for students to start here and finish here.
The perceptions of the community began to change, and they said the people who are academically oriented and are talented as far as doing what we would call, I think, academic work and doing well, are attending these schools, and they're transferring with great success.
It was a huge deal for Brooklyn Park to get North Hennepin College. You know, initially right in the middle of nowhere, but Brooklyn Park quickly grew and attracted from students from all over the northwest suburbs. Was one of the leading reasons why Brooklyn Park developed so quickly, was the fact that people knew the college was there and drove through these farmlands and knew that this land was going to be available in the near future for development. The western part of Brooklyn Township in 1954 was afraid of becoming part of Osseo. Osseo wanted to expand their tax base. They wanted more land to develop or grow their town. It was a small town, so they were desperately looking for more land. When Brooklyn Park incorporated into a village in 1954, it was still all rural, it was still all farming. But things changed very quickly after that. After World War II, as the expansion into the suburbs started.
Beautiful part of Brooklyn Park was the city leadership, going way back into the 1960s and 70s, and making farming somewhat predictable as to when the transition might occur from farming to residential or commercial.
One of the first things I did when I got on the council, I said, we have this comprehensive plan, and I brought it up as an issue, and we voted it in, became one of the first cities in the state to have a comprehensive plan. Well, the plan was, where is everything going to go in Brooklyn Park? Where do we see development happen, and how will it happen?
We developed in stages, and we had a master plan that we went by. And I'm very proud that I was a part of that master plan as well. We didn't allow development beyond certain points.
We did not allow development unless they were next to utilities. They had to put in utilities.
When I was on the city council and we were putting in sewer and water in the southern part of the city, we said we are not going to allow any subdivisions for homes unless it has sewer and water. That cut off the development. So we had this so-called line of north of 85th and south of 85th. Well, the city was really able to control the development north of 85th by the extension of sewer and water and utilities.
It shows that plan has worked, and the people, the planners and the council have gone along with it. It's worked quite well.
Brooklyn Park in the late 1970s or early 1980s was one of the first cities to see what was happening in a few other spots in the United States, that you could really develop around a nice golf course.
One of the major people that worked with developers to build the housing and everything in the city indicated that they wanted to build a golf course.
We thought if we could put the lands together and develop a major golf course from a known architect, it would be a real publicity draw, providing some identity and providing some major housing. We're looking at about 1975 that we started working on the golf course idea. It was myself and Mayor Jim Krautkramer.
We kept talking about it. And finally I went to Evelyn Schmidt, who was the head of Schmidt Realty, and said, Evelyn, what are you going to do? Are you going to build a golf course or not? And it was not too long after that that they came to the conclusion that they wanted to build a golf course, and it was going to be a major golf course.
In the early 1980s, they brought in a top golf course designer, and they knew that you could really develop land. So you could sell houses or sell lots on this golf course, and it would be a great amenity to really bring in a huge tax base.
We broke ground in approximately 1982 to 83. And it took a couple of years. We actually wound up opening in 1986.
It was a community golf course. It was not a private golf course, and which eventually led to us having the LPGA here for a number of years.
1989 is when the first LPGA was held here, and it was here for approximately 8 years. We drew anywhere from 30 to 50,000 people each year. We got numerous news articles throughout the metropolitan area and in fact nationwide. And that has brought in golfers from all over the world, frankly, since.
You know, with the facility, with the event and conference center and the bar and restaurant, and with this beautiful golf course, it's been a destination site for all of the metro area.
It was the driving force for the housing around the course. Without that, we wouldn't have had $500,000 homes or $750,000 homes.
It had a tremendous and a huge economical and financial impact on the city.
We want to make this a world-class golf course, and it was, and it still is one of the major city golf courses in the country. It's a necessity to continue that. I was interested in transportation, and I got on the Transportation Advisory Board of the Metropolitan Council. We came to the conclusion that one of the things we needed was another major thoroughfare through the city. And I-610 was that.
610, I mean, that's going to give us a chance to have people come all the way from St. Cloud and beyond through Brooklyn Park.
What we want on 610 is people working in the city, traveling to our city, that'll drive restaurants, that'll drive retail around here.
If you go along at 610 and see all the new construction of businesses, we've got a lot of new employment here.
Now with 610 being completed out to Interstate 94, that's going to be a big boost for additional jobs in that 610 corridor.
When Target landed and actually spent $100 millions, and then we started to get other businesses moving in, 610 getting completed, and so some of that infrastructure started to get cleaned up. The businesses started showing up.
Without 610, there would not be any development. That's going to have a big impact on the taxes for the city.
We work hard to make sure people feel wanted, feel valued, and we want to retain businesses. So all these little pieces, I think, started happening at the same time, and not one little thing said, hey, this is why this happened. Because if we weren't business friendly, the world's greatest road doesn't matter.
Every time I go down 610, I see new buildings going up, and so I know our plan worked.
We really got the Parks and Recreation program in Brooklyn Park going.
The parks were a key part of Brooklyn Park, and it's a good thing that they have all of them and that they all have all of them, and they're great amenities now, wonderful playgrounds where everybody can gather.
Dennis Palm was the park director. Dennis was so dedicated to parks, did just a whale of a job in getting Brooklyn Park going in that direction. We did a lot of sketching on maps, and then, you know, because I knew a lot of the property owners who might be interested in selling something. And
the idea for Brooklyn Park was always to have a park within a couple of minutes of every home, and they've done that.
How many people can say they have Mississippi River? We can say that, and so we're working on a revamp of a big park on the Mississippi that's been pretty dormant, Three Rivers Park, and that's what we're partnering. So you're going to see a state-of-the-art park that celebrates nature.
I had neighbors that said, you don't need that many parks, you know, and of course, if you grew up on a farm, I suppose that a park wasn't that important. But if you grew up in a single-family home, and the only place to play baseball was in the street, a park became very, very important for your youngsters.
In the 1950s and 60s, when the village of Brooklyn Park was established, and then there was a need for much more housing, one of the first things they looked at were apartment buildings, and because there was cheaper housing, that brought in an influx of minorities into the southern part.
Early in the 70s, towards the end of the Vietnam War, and the Vietnamese people asking to come to the United States, churches would adopt and sponsor families to come over. And I know our church adopted or sponsored a family to come. And so this was a Vietnamese family. I mean, we can remember going to the airport and picking up this mother and father and these tiny little children and helping them get an apartment in Brooklyn Park, and then helping them get jobs. That was really something, to be able to help a family. So to me, that was the first immigrants into our community, were the Vietnamese that the churches kind of surrounded and supported. A lot of people could find affordable housing in the apartments. So whether it was new immigrants from Vietnam or whoever was coming, the word kind of traveled that you could go to Brooklyn Park and get affordable housing in apartments.
A lot of Liberians were sending their families to the U.S. for safety because of the Civil War lasted 15 plus years. And so we started to get a reputation in Minnesota for being welcoming.
In later years, as there became turmoil in other parts of the world, there was refugees from other countries that came here. And it was mostly because there was available land, available or inexpensive housing, and that there was a very strong church community here that was willing to help with those new immigrants. Missionaries had already been to Liberia. You know, they were already prominent in Liberia, so you had a lot of Methodists. So there was this church community that they could tap into or find as a resource for them. And then Brooklyn Park, really became a melting pot for a lot of these refugees or new immigrants.
We came to America because we wanted our children to be exposed to a new life and to learn from other people. But when we also came and found that there's a church like that, a diverse church, I felt that we can be able to transition from, the culture that we're used to, not that we want to live it, but we want to be here in an environment that I would say we trust. And that's why church became a wonderful place to transition, where we feel that someone is not going to judge me, or if they judge me, church is a place for everybody.
Help us to reflect your character.
I may make mistakes, I may act in the African way, but that's why it's church. We come here to be polished and to help each other. So church became a wonderful place that will really help me. And yet, they just accept us the way we are. And that's why I've loved to stay in this church.
I think Brooklyn Park citizens, churches, schools, and the city did a really good job of embracing that we are many, many cultures here.
People tend to associate diversity with bad things. You heard things like Brooklyn Dark, and so people would say that, and that was a community thing. Well, that's not a good thing that Minnesotans should be proud of, that when they see people of diverse backgrounds, that's what they refer to cities as. But that was the reality that we lived in. And it's come very much a different circle now. Yeah. We started a program called Community Engagement, and so we tried to build bridges or connections with our community. It's very diverse. So when I say we're a diverse community, our diversity is diverse. We have a quarter of our city is African/West African, two distinct cultures. People at the surface may see one, but they are not the same. We have about a quarter of our city is Asian American. We're the largest Vietnamese city. We're going to pass St. Paul for the largest Hmong city. And then about 45% of our city is white, about 5% is Latino. And so we have all these different groups, and within the groups, there are many different, if I say West African, it can be Liberian, Ghanaian, it can be, even non-West African, Nigerian, Kenyan. And so what we found is we have all these little groups, and that we started to celebrate each and every one of them. So instead of just saying, hey, it's a bunch of West Africans or a bunch of people, African immigrants, we actually went one step deeper. We started to engage with them at their tribal levels, at their country levels. But what the Liberian kind of connection did was it taught the city how to engage with a specific culture. It gave us the confidence of how do we do that. So we kind of learned our template about how do we engage with people. I think we've seen a much greater noticeable influx on the Asian business front, where the communities that were predominantly St. Paul, second generation, third generation Hmong, are moving to Brooklyn Park. And so the businesses are following.
Different countries, they bring different food to the Brooklyn Park. So we can try and enjoy more, I would say more like international food, I always believe that, for the restaurant, the food and the service and the cleanliness, those three that try the customer. The reason I picked the city food park because diversity and because of the geographic, because it's close to the city.
The reason why I choose Brooklyn Park area, there's a diverse community here. They do need sometimes ethnic food. That's why I located my store in Brooklyn Park. I do work 12 hours every day, 7 days. So just working hard and try to improve the store.
But right now I stick with what I happy. I think is so far so good.
Brooklyn Park is a great city. I've been happy to live in Brooklyn Park. The city also help small business. I'm happy with the way they help out small business.
I am so thankful to be in Brooklyn Park. I'm so thankful for the church community.
We have our own diversity within Brooklyn Park, and it's just wonderful. It's really special. You can't go anywhere else and find it, so that's what makes Brooklyn Park so wonderful.
Brooklyn Park has a great future.
We've grown into a big city. We're a sixth largest city. We're 80,000 people.
It's not often a city gets a second chance. At one time Brooklyn Park was the suburb to live in, and then when the crime and stuff happened and all the changes, I think we're getting a second crack at it.
The city does a good job of engagement. The city has neighborhoods so people can get together and work together as neighbors to help improve their areas.
I think it's a comfortable community to live in, growing better in terms of a place to work in. The recreation opportunities, the trail system is just outstanding.
They're doing a lot with the new Hy-Vee store and all the development of 610. That will really energize Brooklyn Park also. So Brooklyn Park will be a great place to live for many, many years.
I think if people want to be in a city of the future, they should be here, because their kids are going to have an opportunity to grow up with kids from other cultures. which is the future.
It has the parks, it has the businesses, it has the roads, it has the trails. It really has everything.